So, as you probably noticed, there's a brand new volcanic eruption ongoing here in Iceland. It's actually again at Fagradalsfjall, the same area where there was an eruption last year. And as you can imagine, I'm really excited about this. I went to the last eruption about 44 times, spent a lot of time there. I wrote a book about it, and this was one of the biggest events in my photography career up to now. So I'm so really excited and grateful that this is happening again, and that we can visit it safely, and that it's safely away from the nearby town, which is Grindavik. And as you can imagine, it's been a very busy few days for me, and I'm trying to keep up with everything, with all the messages I've been getting from people. And one of the things that stood out a lot for me is that there are a lot of questions on how you can fly a drone around the eruption and above a volcanic eruption. So I decided to make this video. I'm going to talk about my top 10 tips or top 10 advice I can give you on how to fly around the eruption and what to keep in mind. Just a little disclaimer, I'm using a DJI Air 2S, so it's not a really big drone, but it works really well for me. The image quality is very good for what I can get a lot out of it, let me phrase it like that. And I'm really happy with it. But yeah, so let's just dive in, and let's start with tip number 1. Tip number 1 is don't trust the automated features on your drone, such as automatic return to home. It's probably the most important one you shouldn't trust. The reason for that is that I've noticed that it seems like the lava around certain temperatures, it seems to interfere with the compass in the drone. And what this causes is that even though your drone knows exactly on the map where it took off, it doesn't know what direction it's facing. So when you use automatic return to home, your drone might think that it's flying in a different direction than it actually is, which means that your drone might not return to home. It might just fly away, and maybe it will crash into a mountain, maybe it will just run out of battery and fall into the lava field. So the best tip I can give you is to make sure that before you take off and fly away, make sure that you look at the surroundings so you can easily identify where you are. And even more importantly maybe is to wear something that's really colorful if you're unsure of where you are. If you wear like a red or yellow jacket, it's going to be a lot more easy to find out where you are on the mountainside, especially when there are a few hundred other people watching the eruption with you. So tip number 2 is always shoot bracketed, and this is necessary because the lava, it is a light source, it emits light, so the contrast between the lava and the background can be really big, and that's why you should shoot bracketed. So bracketed means that you take a shot and it actually is 3 shots. It's one underexposed by one stop, one overexposed by one stop, and one normal exposure. And this allows you to then go to Lightroom or whatever software you're using and blend them together so you get a nice, nicely exposed photograph. And to take that one step further, I actually always shoot panoramas. So when I take a photograph, I always stitch it together from different photographs. So for example, my vertical shots, they're actually 3 different photos. I just pan the camera and then I create this nice wide angle look with the drone. And then I also have them bracketed. So it's actually every photo consists out of 9 different photos, which are then merged together in Lightroom. For my more wide angle panoramas, I actually take 27 photos. So it's 9 photos like this. And then each of them is bracketed. And then I merge them all together so I get a nicely exposed image. This also allows you to bring back a lot of detail from the shadows. It allows you to retain the highlights. So it's really important to get the best image quality for photography. Tip number 3 is a really obvious one, and it's don't go too close to the lava with your drone. things can get really bad really fast if you go too close to the lava. So what happens with a lot of drones is that the underside completely melts, the sensors get destroyed, sometimes even the camera gets destroyed, and if you're really unlucky, maybe even the propellers melt and your drone won't even be able to fly back anymore. So it's really important to keep your distance and always keep in mind that you don't listen to what other people are telling you about height. So this is it sounds like a little bit of weird advice, but just follow me with this. If someone tells you, oh yeah, I was flying 100 meters above the lava, that's actually not true. The only thing the person knows is that he was flying 100 meters above where he took off. So the height that you see on the drone, it's relative to where you were standing when you started the flight. So if the person was flying at 100 meters, but he was standing on top of a mountain, or he was standing in the bottom of a valley, it makes a huge difference. It's a 200-meter difference in this case, in this area. So any height advice is only valuable if you also know where the person was standing. And furthermore, it's only valuable if you know what the weather conditions were like, because if there is a lot of wind, you can get a lot lower because the heat coming from the lava, it gets pushed away much quicker than if there is no wind. So these are all things to keep in mind. So how high can you go? Well, that's a question I can't really answer for you. And the only thing I can advise you is to just see what happens and take a little bit of a risk. It's always going to be a risk when you fly above it. But you just have to keep a visual eye on where your drone is, and that gives you a good idea of what's too hot. Also, don't fly into the gas, because the gas is really hot as well. So really important that you don't go there. Tip number 4 is try to always shoot in a cropped video mode. And with a cropped video mode, I mean, for example, with my Air 2S, if you shoot at 4K 60, it will actually be a cropped image. And this is really good because it means you can keep more distance without actually losing quality in your footage. And what's really interesting is that with most drones, the higher you go in the quality, so if you go 4K 60 or maybe even 5.4K 30, you will get a cropped image. So this actually helps you when filming an eruption. And I always film in 4K 60, not because of the quality difference, but just because of this crop mode. It's actually quite nice to be able to keep more distance and still get a really good image. The next advice I want to give you, tip number 5, is to keep moving around with your drone. The most problems occur when someone has been stationary above a certain place for too long. So especially if you're filming straight down into the crater, straight down into the fissure, it's really important that you maybe film like 30, 40 seconds if you're too close, and then keep moving, because your movement will cause the drone to cool down. And this is of course different depending on the wind of that day, but if it's really windy, you can probably stay stationary for much longer than if it's not. But yeah, keep that in mind. Try to move around as much as possible and don't stay too long in the same place, because that might damage your drone. I had a problem the other day where I was hovering for too long above the fissure and the aircraft processor unit overheated, and this then forced my drone to fly back to where I was standing, so automatic return to home. You cannot cancel it. So it's really important that you try to avoid the situation because of what I explained to you before. If you have this return to home be forced on you, you can get into a situation where if the compass is messed up, it will not return to what your home location is. So it's really good to keep that in mind and avoid that. Tip number 6 is keep your distance from other people flying drones. The reason is that if you're too close together with this many drones in the same area, I've noticed that there can be a lot of interference between remotes and transmissions. I especially noticed this when someone is flying a Mavic 3 around my Air2S. I've noticed that if we are within 10 meters of each other, it severely degrades the quality of the transmission on my remote. So I try to stay away from other people. Also, it's good to give each other a little bit of room when you're coming back with the drone, so you can safely land it if you're not confident in just grabbing it out of the air. That's something that I'm always doing, but I've seen many people who are not really confident in that. So if you're one of those people, then just make sure you have a lot of room so you can maneuver around, especially when it's quite windy. And also, and that's a little additional tip, a little bit of a courtesy to other people, is if you're going to be flying your drone a lot, just stay away from people who want to just enjoy the show. Don't ruin the experience for them by just flying the drone and hovering above them or something. Just be mindful of other people. It's a good tip and goes for a lot of other things also, I think. Be careful for sudden updrafts and also be careful for strong winds in general. As you probably know, Iceland is notorious for being a really windy country, and there is no difference when you're up at the eruption up in the mountains. It can get really windy there. So be mindful of that when you're flying your drone. And also when the hot air coming from the lava mixes with the cold air from the surroundings, it can create a lot of really strange wind situations. One that's quite common is that there are dust devils around the eruption. Try to be mindful of those. If you see something that's weird, or you notice that your drone is having a lot of difficulty staying level with the ground, then don't fly really fast, don't make any sudden movements, because this could result in all kinds of disaster. Tip number 8 goes together with tip number 7. It's if you have multiple drones, always use the drone that has the best wind resistance. I know that some people who have a Mavic 3 or a Mavic 2, they also have a Mini 2 because it's more convenient. Mini 2 will probably work when there is not a lot of wind, but if there is a lot of wind, always use the bigger drone. It's not uncommon for these smaller drones just to not get back to you anymore. They just can't go into the wind. And if you're unsure about the wind resistance on the day you're there, what I would recommend is you take off the drone and then fly into the wind, away from the eruption, and see what happens. Is your drone struggling a lot? Is it not struggling a lot? This will tell you a lot about what to expect. And if it's struggling a lot, then you know probably it's not a good idea to fly the drone over the eruption. So yeah, just be careful of the wind resistance and be mindful of it. Tip number 9 goes for pretty much every flight or every risky flight you're going to do, which is definitely risky to fly above a volcanic eruption. But the tip is to always swap out SD cards between flights. The reason for that is if you have some great footage on the first flight and you are going to use your second battery, then it's a good idea to swap out the SD card. So if your drone would get lost, just if it would happen, then you still have the footage from the first flight. If you don't do that, you just lose everything. So it's a really good idea to have a good routine, have multiple micro SD cards for your drone, and swap them out as you're progressing in flying above the eruption. And tip number 10, the final tip, is to always leave a little bit of margin on your batteries. So don't wait until the last possible moment to fly home when your remote is telling you to fly home. The reason for this is that together with everything that I've explained before, the sudden winds and the strange behavior you can get around flying above an eruption, it's a good idea to give yourself a little bit of margin. If there is a lot of wind or sudden wind makes it a lot more difficult for your drone to fly back, you will still have enough margin if you don't wait until the last possible moment. Another tip that goes together with this one, if you're getting into trouble, it's always best to fly first to the nearest piece of regular ground. So you can just fly off the lava field above the ground and then fly back like that. If your drone struggles and loses battery, you can just land somewhere else and then go and get the drone. If you fly straight back over the lava field and you run out of battery there, no way you will be able to get your drone back. Don't even try to go there. And really important, don't walk on the lava. Definitely don't walk on the new lava. It's incredibly, incredibly dangerous. No drone is worth that. But yeah, so be a little bit mindful. Try to follow the land as much as possible, or the land, the regular ground, as much as possible. So if you have to make an emergency landing, you don't lose your drone. So that's it for my top 10 advice on how to fly a drone above a volcanic eruption. I hope it was useful to you. I think there's some valuable tips there, some things you might not know or might not expect. So I hope it can be useful in getting a safe flight above the eruption. If you want more photography advice on how to photograph a volcanic eruption, or you want to get some ideas of what kind of shots you can take, I actually wrote a book about the eruption last year. It's called New Earth, and I explain how I approached it and how I tackled photographing the eruption. I also share settings with all the photos so you can get an idea of what I was trying to achieve. Also, I have an ebook out with 35 locations in Iceland. I not only share 35 of my favorite locations, but also how you can get there, how I would approach photographing these areas, and how to behave responsibly when you're there. I thought that was a really important thing to add to my guide. Both my book and my ebook can be found on my website. My book can also be found in different bookstores in Reykjavik, at the airport here in Iceland, and also in different souvenir stores. Getting my ebook or my book, it's a huge way to support me. So I'd be very grateful if you would grab up a copy of either one. Additionally, I'm also organizing photo workshops, which you can also find on my website. There's a list there. There are not a lot of places left, so please have a look, and if you're interested, be quick. And other than that, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Please subscribe to my channel. It's an easy and free way to support my work and support what I'm doing. And yeah, other than that, I guess I will see you in the next video. And if you're around the eruption and you see me, come and say hi. Maybe we can have a chat. Bye.